Welcome to Echoes of Ihsan. We're diving deep today.
Into?
Yeah.
Mm.
Into the ethics of hunting and slaughtering in Islam.
Okay.
We're going to be using Sahih Bukhari Hadith, book 67. It's all about hunting and slaughtering.
All right.
People might think, oh, that's just halal dietary laws, right? But there's so much more to it.
Way more.
It's a whole universe of ethical considerations.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to go beyond just like the basic do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
And get a better understanding of Ihsan.
Ooh, I love that.
That idea of compassion and mercy extending to animals too.
I think that's what's so cool about all of this is that like these things that we might think of as like, oh, this is, kind of, I don't know.
Everyday stuff.
Yeah, everyday stuff, or maybe even a little bit mundane.
Right.
But actually, they're full of this sense of responsibility and ethical awareness.
Absolutely. And I think one of the first things that struck me was how detailed it gets.
Oh, yeah.
With the tools and the methods.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like, for example, there's this tool called a mirad, right?
Uh-huh.
It was used for hunting, and it had a sharp edge and a blunt side.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it makes you think, well, how did you actually kill the animal?
It's a big difference, right? And the hadiths actually talk about that, like 384, 385, 386, and 394.
Okay.
So the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that if the animal is killed with the sharp edge, then it's okay to eat.
Right.
But if it's killed by the blunt side,
Uh-oh.
it's considered like it was beaten to death.
Oh, wow.
And then it's not halal.
So it really matters how the animal is killed.
Yeah.
It's not just like, oh, as long as it's dead, we're good. It's about minimizing the suffering through the whole process.
Exactly.
Kind of reminds me of like how people talk now about humane slaughter, right?
Yes.
Where it's all about making sure the animal dies quickly and doesn't feel pain.
I see that, yeah.
And this is really all about Ihsan,
Right.
compassion and mercy.
Even when you have to take a life.
Yeah. Okay, so another scenario. Okay. I'm out hunting with my trained dog.
Okay.
I say the name of Allah, send the dog off.
Right.
But then another dog shows up.
Oh.
Now, I don't know, did my dog make the kill?
Interesting, yeah. So the hadiths actually give us some guidance on this. 384, 385, 392, 393, 394, and 395.
Wow, a lot of them.
Yeah, they touch on this. And basically, if you're not sure which dog killed it, it's better to be safe and not eat the animal.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like better safe than sorry, but for hunting.
Exactly. It shows how important certainty and clarity are in Islamic practice.
But why is it so important that it was your dog?
Well, it's about intention. When you mention Allah's name before sending your dog, you're dedicating the hunt, you're seeking sustenance from Allah.
I see.
But when another dog comes in, suddenly you're not sure if it went the way you intended.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not just the act of hunting, it's about the spiritual side too.
Yeah, the ethics of it.
Yeah, okay. So speaking of guidance, the hadiths talk about owning dogs.
Okay.
I was kind of surprised to learn that just having a dog as a pet wasn't really encouraged back then.
Yeah, hadiths 389, 390, and 391 talk about that.
Okay.
And they say that having a dog just for company, not so much.
Right.
But if you had one for hunting or guarding livestock, that was okay.
So it's not like you couldn't have a dog at all. It was more about what its job was.
Exactly. It was a practical approach, right?
Yeah, it makes sense for the time.
Yeah, back then, dogs had jobs to do.
Yeah.
They weren't just pets like we think of them now.
It really makes you think, how would we apply these ideas today?
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
Things have changed so much.
Definitely. What was practical back then could be a big ethical debate now.
Okay, but before we go too far with that, let's get back to the hadiths.
Sounds good.
One thing that really struck me was how they emphasize using tools that make sure the animal has a quick and painless death when you're slaughtering it.
Yes, absolutely.
Like hadiths 406, 411, 414, 417, and 451.
Okay.
They're very specific about the tools you can use.
They are. It has to be sharp, let the blood flow freely.
Right, so the animal dies quickly.
Right.
It seems like they really wanted to avoid causing unnecessary pain.
Absolutely.
Even though, hunting and slaughtering, you're taking a life.
Right.
There's still that concern for minimizing the harm.
Yeah, and it's not just about following rules.
Yeah.
The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he explained why these guidelines were important.
Right.
He said that you have to treat animals with respect.
Even in death.
Even in death, and you can't be cruel.
It's a nice reminder that Islam isn't just about the rituals,
That's
It's about how you live your whole life.
Yeah, treating others with compassion and awareness, always.
Yeah, even when it doesn't seem very spiritual.
It's about understanding that everything is connected. Your actions affect everything around you.
That makes me think of those stories in the Hadiths.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Like the one about the giant sea creature.
Oh, in Hadiths 401 and 402?
Yeah, yeah. Imagine an army stranded in the desert.
Oh, wow.
They're starving.
Tough situation.
And then
Oh.
this massive fish, like nothing they've ever seen before, washes ashore.
Wow, what a blessing.
Yeah. And they're able to eat for weeks.
Yeah, that is a story of survival,
It is.
but it also shows how much respect they had for the animal.
Right, even though they ate it.
Even in death, they used every part of it.
Oh, yeah. They even used the fat.
They did, rubbed it on their bodies.
Or, like, health benefits.
It's their health, exactly.
Wow. They were really resourceful.
They were.
Yeah.
They understood the value of what Allah had provided.
Yeah. Then there's the story about the donkey meat.
Oh, right. Hadiths 405 and 436.
Yes. On the day they conquered Khaybar,
Big day.
the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, suddenly said, donkey meat is unlawful.
Wow, just like that.
Yeah. They were already cooking it.
Oh.
And he told them to throw it all away, even destroy the pots they used.
That's a strong statement.
Right. It shows how important those distinctions were
Absolutely.
between what's halal and what's not.
It wasn't just about taste.
It was about following Allah's will.
Exactly.
It's amazing. Even something as simple as eating.
Right.
It reflects your values and your relationship with the divine.
That's so true.
I love how these little details show us something so much bigger.
They do, yeah.
A way of life where everything you
Not a
do,
single thing.
yeah, even practical things,
Yeah.
they're all connected to your ethics and your spirituality.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
It really is.
Yeah.
It shows that every action, no matter how small,
No matter how small.
it creates a ripple effect.
It does.
It affects you and the world around you.
That's something to think about.
It is. It's about living intentionally.
Being mindful.
Yeah, and always trying to make sure your actions match your values.
I like that.
It's a journey, though.
It is a journey.
Always learning and growing.
Always.
We've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive.
We have.
But don't worry, we'll be back soon to explore even more of this fascinating world of Islamic ethics and how they relate to animals.
Looking forward to it. These stories, they're not just stories, right? They show us how these principles were actually lived out.
Yeah, it's like seeing the ethics in action.
Exactly. Not just theories, but real life.
And it's important to remember, all this was happening at a very different time.
Oh, absolutely.
Hunting and raising animals, that was how people survived.
It was essential. Not a hobby, not a sport.
Yeah, it was about feeding yourself, feeding your family, your community.
Exactly. So using every part of the animal, like in that sea creature story,
Right.
it shows this deep respect for what Allah had provided.
It's like they understood that nothing should be wasted.
And that respect, it wasn't just for animals that were food.
Oh, right, like the hadith about horse meat.
Yeah, Hadith 419.
That was clarified on the same day that donkey meat became haram.
It's interesting, isn't it, how these rulings came about in response to real situations.
Yeah, it shows how flexible Islamic teachings can be.
Flexible, but grounded in principles.
Right, it's about guidance, not just rules.
Exactly. Wisdom and discernment, that's what's needed.
And even when certain animals were halal, there were still rules about how to treat them.
Absolutely. Like in Hadiths 421 and 422.
What is about?
The Prophet, peace be upon him, he condemned shooting at animals that were tied up.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's not fair at all.
It goes against the very idea of Ihsan.
Even in hunting, you have to be fair, show respect.
Exactly. It should be about skill, not about making the animal suffer.
It makes you think about hunting today. You know,
In what way?
like how some animals are bred in captivity or lured into traps.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Do those practices really align with these principles?
It's a good question to ask ourselves.
Yeah, it's not about blindly following rules from centuries ago
It's about engaging with these ethical questions.
and trying to act with Ihsan in our own time.
That's the challenge, isn't it? Applying these ancient ideas to modern life.
And it's not just about the physical actions, right? It's also about our intentions.
That's a really important point. Why we do something matters as much as what we do.
Like saying Allah's name before hunting.
Yes. Hadiths 384 and 390 talk about that.
It's acknowledging that you're hunting with Allah's permission,
Seeking sustenance from his bounty.
not just for sport or to show off.
It elevates the act, connects it to something bigger,
Yeah, it makes it sacred.
and that connection to the divine, it can change even the hardest things.
Like in Hadith 441,
What's that one about?
the Prophet, peace be upon him, he talks about those who are wounded fighting for Allah.
Oh, right, right.
He says their wounds will bleed on the day of judgment,
Powerful image.
but the blood will smell like musk,
Beautiful.
even pain and suffering, when it's for a righteous cause.
It becomes something else entirely.
Yeah, it's like their intention transforms it.
That's the power of intention. Even hardship can be a blessing.
So the outward action is just one part of it.
The inner state matters just as much.
Yeah, that applies to how we treat animals too.
Absolutely. Just following the rules isn't enough.
We have to cultivate compassion, even when taking a life is necessary.
It's about Ihsan, remembering that everything is connected.
Treating all beings with respect, even if they're not useful to us.
That's what these teachings are all about.
They're a guide for us today as we face these really complicated ethical issues.
Especially when it comes to our relationship with the animal world,
It makes us think even about things like hunting and slaughtering,
which might seem far removed from our modern lives.
but there's so much we can learn from them.
About responsibility, about respect, about the web of life.
It's a reminder that every action we take,
Big or small.
it has ethical consequences.
And that's never been more important than it is today.
You're right. Our impact on the environment, on animal welfare.
It's huge.
We've covered a lot of ground exploring these Islamic ethics,
So much to think about.
but we're not done yet. There's still more to unpack.
We've only just begun to understand the depth of these teachings. There's so much depth to these teachings on hunting and slaughtering in Islam. It's amazing how relevant they still are.
I know, right? You'd think they'd be outdated, but they really speak to us today.
It's like even though the world's changed so much, the core values still apply.
Yeah. And the more we look at this topic, the more I realize it's not just about what you do, but about your mindset too.
Absolutely. Your intentions. It's about aligning yourself with Ihsan,
Compassion, mercy, respect for everything.
all of creation.
It's about realizing we're all connected and that our actions matter.
It's like that ripple effect you were talking about.
Exactly. And that we need to live intentionally, always checking if our actions match our values.
It's a constant process.
Definitely. It's a journey.
Always learning, always striving to be better.
And going deeper into this, I'm struck by how it's not just about the physical act itself.
Like the actual hunting or slaughtering.
Yeah, but the spiritual side of it too.
The why behind the what.
Exactly. Like saying Allah's name before you hunt.
It's not just a ritual.
It's about recognizing that you're doing this with Allah's permission,
Seeking his bounty.
not just for fun or to prove yourself.
It adds a whole other dimension.
A sacredness,
A humility.
Yeah, it connects you to something bigger.
And that connection can make even the toughest things bearable.
Like in that Hadith 441 about the wounds of those fighting for Allah,
Powerful imagery.
bleeding on the day of judgment.
But the blood smelling like musk,
Imagine that. Even suffering, when it's for a righteous
it's
cause,
transformed.
their intention changes it completely.
That's how powerful intention is. Even hardship becomes a blessing.
So it's not just what you do, but why you do it.
Your inner state is just as important.
And that's true for how we treat animals too.
We can't just follow the rules blindly.
We have to develop compassion, even when we're taking a life,
It's about Ihsan, remembering that we're all part of this web of life.
treating all beings with respect, whether or not they're useful to us.
That's the core of these teachings.
And they're so relevant for us today.
As we grapple with these big ethical questions about our relationship with animals,
It makes us think differently about even these age-old practices.
this hunting and slaughtering,
There's so much wisdom there.
about responsibility, about respect, about interconnectedness,
It shows us that every action, no matter how small,
has ethical consequences.
but we have to be aware of that.
Especially now when our impact on the world is so big.
This has been an incredible journey exploring these teachings.
So much to think about.
We've just scratched the surface, but it's been so enriching.
It really shows how Islam isn't just about rituals,
It's a way of life.
a way of being compassionate and aware.
And even in the simplest things, like how we eat,
We can practice Ihsan.
showing mercy and compassion,
These ancient principles, they're like a guide for us today.
helping us live ethically and mindfully.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
I'd like you to think about your own relationship with animals.
how can you live with Ihsan?
What choices can you make that reflect compassion and respect?
Let this be a starting point for you,
To explore these principles even further.
and to find a more harmonious way of living with all creatures.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Islamic ethics.
May we all strive to honor the sanctity of life in all its forms.